Hey, this is Ben here with my cube preview of Imposing Sovereign, which just got spoiled here on July 4th. New M14 card. So here's a picture of the card here. It's a 2-1 for 2, which in aggro decks is fine. So you're essentially upgrade from Savannah Lions and Elite Vanguard, those that do the same thing for 1 mana, 2-1 for 1. So for the extra mana, you get the ability, creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So I've spent the last few minutes trying to wrap my brain around exactly how this is going to affect CubeDrafts and how it's going to be used in an average game. So been thinking through the aggro deck, because that's where your brain goes first, in the aggro deck. Having a 2-1 for 2 where all your opponent's creatures come into play tapped is such a strong starting point, because most of the decks that aggro feast on, especially the slower decks, you want to kill them before they can get online, and making all their creatures come into play tapped essentially for free, because that's what you're doing here. Especially if they're able to, if you get them down to like 6, 7, or 8 life, and then they land a Planeswalker, and then they plus it to drop a token into play, well, that token comes into play tapped. They're going to have to use a token. They're going to have to use a Planeswalker ability that kills or detains a creature or something like that to make it relevant. So, not to mention, all the aggro stuff is great, but not to mention go in control decks, which seems weird, a 2-1 for 2 going in a control deck. It might be more of a sideboard card, but being able to come into play against all the red hasty guys just is really a good play. Like your Hell's Thunders, your Hellspark Elementals, those cards just become just moot. They don't do anything. Even better against the red 4-drop hasty guys, because when you're in the control deck, you're just trying to survive, and against the red deck or against the fast decks. So dropping this on turn 2 or will just slow your opponents down, hopefully just enough to get you to that late game where things are going to be relevant. And worst case, you can always just chump block with it, in the control deck. So to be a 2-1 for 2 in the cube and make it has to do something really sweet. And again, I've only seen this card for just a few minutes, but my early impressions are this is going to be a sweet card. I feel like this is going to be a good card for the cube, and an effect that white decks, especially the white aggro decks, are really going to want. Maybe I'm hyping it up in my head too much, but I think, for me, running a 540 cube, I think this is going to be a definite include. A side thing to note is that it's a human. That's the creature type, is a human, and that will go with Champion of the Parish. The longer we go and the more cubing we do, I'm hoping Champion of the Parish will get more and more playable. Preferably we just get some better white 1-drops. But until then, ways to make Champion of the Parish closer to playable, and this is definitely a way to do that. So this is my cube here. This is just a visual spoiler of some of the 2-drops that I run, actually all the white 2-drops. So I'm trying to think which cards on this list does it look better, because again, I'm running a powered 540. So like, which are the weaker cards? Like, looking at these 6 right here, the weakest card of these 6 is Leonin Relic Warder, I think. Lone Missionary has done a lot of work, and I'm very happy with the other 4 cards, even the double white of Knight of Meadowgrain. I would say Relic Warder is the worst out of these 6, so I'm going to scroll down to the next batch. Nearheath Pilgrim is a card I added recently just to kind of test, and it's been okay. Has been not very impressive, but if I'm just looking for a straight swap, to me, getting rid of the Soul Bond, pair him to give lifelink, I'm comparing that to Imposing Sovereign, where creatures enter the battlefield tapped. So, to me, this seems way better. This seems like a way better ability, affects the whole field, doesn't require a second creature, and is just good on its own. And goes in more kind of decks as well. Scrolling down through the rest of the white 2-drops, I'm pretty happy with the rest of my white section. I would say the bottom 3, I would say Nearheath Pilgrim that would be the worst, Leonin Relic Warder next, and then maybe Lone Missionary or Precinct Captain. But for me, this seems like an easy swap in cutting out Nearheath Pilgrim, because I feel like I have a lot of white 2-drops. But back to the Sovereign, if I was running a 450 cube, I would definitely test it. I don't know 360 cubes well enough to know if it's worth testing in that, because those cubes are just so tight and the cards are so good. But I think if you run a 450 cube or bigger, this card's definitely worth at least testing. I know in 540, at least for the short term, I'm just going to do a straight swap with it for the Near Heath Pilgrim, and that's just a strict upgrade. So I'll be back at some point here in the next month or two just with some updated feedback on how it actually plays out in Cube. But my initial impressions are I was really excited to see this card here this morning. It was a pleasant surprise here on the 4th of July. So that's my thoughts on the new card Imposing Sovereign from M14.